from LA. Welcome, Dr. Shriram Sarvotham. We are honored to welcome Dr. Sarvotham as our esteemed speaker for today's webinar on the yoga of the Yoga Sutras. Dr. Sarvotham is a dedicated yoga practitioner since childhood. Dr. Sriram was initiated into yoga by Yogacharya R. Subramanian of Chennai, India, with whom he studied for 14 years. With over 3 decades of teaching experience, he has led more than 300 yoga workshops and retreats across the US and India. Dr. Sriram's teachings offer a profound uh, and holistic experience of yoga, weaving together the wisdom of classical texts such as Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Yajnavalkya, and Hatha Yoga Pradipika. His approach helps students uncover the core principles of yoga, elevating both their understanding and practice. Dr. Sarvotham is a sought after speaker and has presented at prestigious conferences, including the Yoga Alliance Leadership Conference, Texas Yoga Conference, and Texas Medical Conference. He is a founding member of Ekashri Schools of Yoga and serves as a faculty member for Yoga Bharati's teacher training program. His contributions to the field of yoga have been recognized with several honors, including the Exemplary Service Award in Yoga by the Consulate General of India and the Yoga Service Award by ISKCON. In addition to his deep expertise in yoga, Dr. Sriram holds a PhD in electrical and computer engineering from Rice University and works as a senior engineer in the tech industry in the Bay Area, California. His unique ability to bridge ancient wisdom with modern life makes him an inspiring guide for today's session. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shriram Sarvotham. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Sarvotham, and we are eager to listen to you on Yoga of Yoga Sutras. Over to you.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you, Ankur. And thank you all for joining this webinar on the topic of Yoga of the Yoga Sutras. So let me begin the webinar with Dhyana Shloka, meditative chant, an invocation chant on Maharishi Patanjali. Om Yastyatva Rupamadyam Prabhavati Jagato Nekadanugrahaya Prakshina-klesha-rashir-vishama-vishadharo Anekavatra-subhogi Sarvajnana-prasutir-bhujagaparikaro Pritaye yasya nityam Devo hi shassavo vyat sita-vimalatanur Yogado yoga-yuktaha Yogena chittasya Padena vacham Malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena Yopakarottam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi Abahu purushakaram Shankachakrasi dharinam Sahasrashirasam shvetam Pranamami Patanjalim Shrimate Anantaya Nagarajaya namo namaha Asmadacharyebhyah sarvebhyo namo namaha Om. Namaste, and thank you once again for joining us in this webinar. So today, I will give a brief overview of what the Yoga Sutras is about. The great Maharishi Patanjali captures the essence of the practice and wisdom of yoga in a very short text. The Yoga Sutras is a relatively short text that comprises of little under 200 sutras or aphorisms or terse sentences that goes to the heart of yoga. And in today's session, we will look at some of the basic ideas. What is the goal of yoga according to the Yoga Sutras and what is yoga according to the Yoga Sutras. So let me share a few slides that I have prepared for today. Okay. So a good place to begin is to ask the question, what is yoga? What is yoga? The word yoga in the modern day and age, it brings pictures in our mind of people doing asanas. But as we all know, yoga is much deeper than that. And when we look at the dictionary definition of yoga, we see three different definitions that are given. So when we say the dictionary definition, we can look at the Dhatu Patha, the classic Dhatu Patha of Maharishi Panini, where he captures the dhatus, about 2000 dhatus or verb roots, and he gives the definition of these verb roots. And the word yoga is based on the dhatu yuj, the verb root yuj. And we find three different definitions of the dhatu yuj in the dhatu patha. And therefore, we can ascribe three different meanings to the word yoga. So the first meaning that we see in the dhatu patha is yujir yoge, which means the dhatu yuj is to unite. It refers to union of two entities. To join, to unite in harmony is yoga. So that is one definition. And most people are familiar with this definition of yoga, to unite perhaps the body and the mind with the self, or unite the individual self with the cosmic self, the Jivatman with the Paramatman, and so forth. So this is one definition of yoga, to unite, to join, yujir yoge. The second definition that we see in the Dhatu Patha is yuja samadhao. Yoga is samadhi. In other words, yoga is a state of mind where the mind is in perfect equilibrium. Samadhi, sama, means balance, same. So when the mind is not agitated, when the mind is not going through a roller coaster ride of experiences, ups and downs, when the mind is tranquil, calm, steady, this state of mind is called yoga. So this is the second definition that we see in the Dhatu Patha. Samadhi, yuja samadhau. A third definition that we see in the Dhatu Patha is yuja samyamane. Yuja samyamane. Yoga is samyama. What is samyama? Yama means to control. Samyama means complete control. Complete control over our mind. Mastery of our own mind. So that all the latent potentials and the talents that are hidden within us, they are allowed to express fully. It's like a seed blossoming to its fullness, becoming a big tree, like a banyan tree, and expressing its full potential. So all the talents are not just in the latent or dormant form, but we are blossoming our potential, the inner potential, to fullness. So expressing our full potential is called yoga, yuja samyamani. So these are the three definitions that we see in the Dhatu Patha of Maharishi Panini, the father of Sanskrit grammar. In the Dhatu Patha, we see these three definitions. Now, when we come to the Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali, he aligns with the second definition of Dhatu Patha that we see, Yuja Samadhau. We will see in a few moments Maharishi Patanjali's exact definition of yoga that he gives in the Yoga Sutras. It aligns with this definition, namely, yoga is samadhi. In fact, the classic commentary on the Yoga Sutra, the most referred to commentary of the Yoga Sutras by sage Vyasa, he says right at the beginning of his Yoga Sutra Bhashya that yoga samadhi. According to Maharishi Patanjali, Vyasa says that yoga is samadhi. It aligns to this definition. Maharishi Patanjali's definition of yoga is consistent with the mental equipoise as the definition of yoga. In other words, you won't find in the Yoga Sutras yoga being defined as the union of two entities. You see, Jivatman and Paramatman, and so forth. So, according to the Yoga Sutras, yoga is defined as the state of the mind. And much of the Yoga Sutras is about how to transform the mind, how to bring an inner transformation. According to the words of my yoga teacher, he used to describe it very beautifully. Transforming a yo-yo mind to a yoga mind. In other words, when the mind is jumping up and down, when it is not in samadhi, how can we convert that mind, transform that mind to a state of mental equipoise, where the mind is balanced, where the mind is in a state of equilibrium, even in the face of challenges that we face in our life. Mind is resilient so that we can respond to challenges in our life from a state of equilibrium, balanced mind. And in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali also talks about samyama. So he also alludes to the third definition that we see in the third chapter of the Yoga Sutras, samyama. He defines what is samyama, and he talks about how to unleash the full potential that is dormant within us and give it full expression, how to live our life fully. As we all know, most of us use only a tiny fraction of our potential. Perhaps only 10% of the latent potential of the mind is being used. So how to unleash our full potential? Patanjali also talks about that in the third chapter of the Yoga Sutras. So when we look up the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, we see that there are a little under 200 sutras. In fact, we can chant the whole Yoga Sutras in a short time, less than 20 minutes. You can read the whole of the Yoga Sutras. These sutras are organized in 4 chapters: Samadhi Pada, Sadhana Pada, Vibhuti Pada, and Kaivalya Pada. Pada, or a quarter, is basically one chapter, one quarter, or one fourth of the contents of the Yoga Sutras. And the first chapter deals with Samadhi, where Patanjali talks about the various types of Samadhi. He defines what is Samadhi. In fact, we're going to look at that sutra in a couple of slides. And then he goes on to the specifics, the practices that will bring that inner transformation. So this is the Sadhana Pada, the chapter on practices. And much of what we do inside the yoga mat, the practices such as asanas, pranayama, meditation, and so forth, they come from most of these practices come from the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras. And there are some practices that we see in the third chapter as well. The third chapter is Vibhuti Pada, the chapter on yogic powers. Vibhuti means siddhis, or the yogic powers that are awakened when we practice these sadhanas. And finally, the fourth chapter is called Kaivalya Pada, the chapter on liberation or complete freedom. Complete freedom, the experience of Kaivalya is the topic of the fourth chapter. Now, when we look at these 4 chapters, and when we inquire how is the modern perspective of yoga, people usually associate yoga with asanas. When we look at how much of the Yoga Sutras talk about asanas, it is a very tiny amount. Only 3 sutras out of the 196, they talk about asanas. And only 6 sutras talk about pranayama, breath regulation practices. So what we discover is that the practice of asanas and even pranayama is just a very thin slice of the broad spectrum of yoga practices. So what do the rest of the Yoga Sutras talk about? And that is what we are going to explore in the coming quarter in the course Yoga of the Yoga Sutras. We are going to uncover what the majority of the Yoga Sutras talk about. What is the core, the heart of the Yoga Sutras? That is what we are going to explore upon. So let us tiptoe our way into the Yoga Sutras. So how does Patanjali begin the Yoga Sutra? He talks about yoga in the very first sutra. He talks about yoga as a discipline. As a discipline. He says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Atha Yoga Anushasanam. That's how Patanjali begins the Yoga Sutras. Shasanam means discipline, rules or regulations or guidelines. Anushasanam, the word anu is a prefix or upasarga in Sanskrit. So Anushasanam means self-inspired discipline, a discipline that we introduce in our life willingly. For example, we see the value of taking good care of the body and the mind, and we willingly bring this discipline in our life. So such a self-inspired practice is called Anushasanam. And Patanjali talks about yoga as Anushasanam. Atha, now let us begin the practice of yoga, the self-inspired practice of yoga. Now, what is discipline? What is discipline? Like shasanam or discipline. We can think of discipline as the willingness to go through a short-term discomfort for the sake of experiencing long-term joy. Right? That is what discipline is. We are willing to go through some initial discomfort for the sake of a higher joy or a long-term experience of joy. For example, when we wake up in the morning, it takes some effort to drag the body inside the yoga mat. Initially, it's not a very pleasant experience, especially if you're new to the practice of yoga. The body is unwilling, and we have this temptation. Let me begin from tomorrow. Let me begin from 2026. Right? You want to postpone. Patanjali says, no, no, atha. That's why he says atha, now. Let's begin the practice of yoga now. And willingness to go through this short-term discomfort. The body might be resisting the practice now, but let's begin anyways. And what we discover is once we bring the body to the yoga mat, and in a few short minutes, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes into our practice, we already start experiencing the benefits. The body feels so light. The mind becomes more calm, more alert, more tranquil, more crystal clear. It feels so good. You see? So discipline is nothing but the willingness to go through the short-term resistance or short-term discomfort for a long-term joy. Many times in life, we do the opposite. For example, when we indulge in junk food, when we are tempted to eat junk food, for example, that's a short-term joy. So the food is very tasty. But the next day, it gives complicated results, right? There is a tummy ache. So that is exactly the opposite of Anushasana. Whereas in yoga, the practice of Anushasanam, we are willing to go through short-term discomfort for the sake of long-term joy. There is a shloka in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says something very similar. He says, Yattad agre vishamiva pariname amrutopam tatsukam satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. He says, the willingness to go through this discomfort, that short-term discomfort is not very palatable. He says it's like poison, but it is actually nectar. It is the elixir that will enliven the system. So this is Anushasana. Patanjali introduces yoga as self-discipline. And then he gives his definition of yoga. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta, for the purpose of this talk, we can translate it as the mind. Chitta vrittis are the activities of the mind, different activities of the mind. And here Patanjali says, Chitta vritti nirodha, that means to subside the activities of the mind so that the mind becomes calm. The mind is no longer agitated. The mind becomes tranquil. When the mind becomes peaceful, when we have reduced the chitta vrittis, this state of mind is called yoga. And as I mentioned earlier, in sage Vyasa's commentary of the Yoga Sutras, he interprets this as samadhi, yoga samadhi. So here we see the definition that Patanjali gives. It doesn't talk about union of two entities, but it talks about the state of the mind. The state of the mind is chitta vritti nirodha. The activities of the mind are not rampant, they are not agitated, but it is quiet down. The mind is tranquil. When we examine the state of the mind, usually when we take a pause in our day-to-day activities and when we examine the traffic of thoughts that flow in our mind, have you noticed that most of the thoughts that flow in our mind are not high quality Nobel Prize winning thoughts, right? Most of the thoughts that run in the mind are mundane, trivial thoughts. So most of the prana, our energy, the vital energy in the system, is depleted on these mundane, trivial thoughts, useless thoughts. It's going to help nobody. So what Patanjali says here, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, is when we conserve this prana so that we don't deplete it in unnecessary thoughts, when we quiet the mind, we are not consuming prana, we are conserving prana. We are conserving energy. So in this state of mind, when the mind is in yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, we feel energized. There is more energy, vitality in the system. And with this energy, we have access to high quality thought. We have access to creative thought. We have access to intuition and so forth. So all the challenges that we are facing, if we want a high quality solution to it, one of the best ways we can respond to challenges is to bring the mind to a space of equilibrium, a place of tranquility, so that the mind is now receptive to creative thought or high quality thought. And that is what happens when we quiet the mind in yoga, in samadhi. Now, what happens when the chitta vrittis are reduced? When we restrain or reduce the chitta vrittis, Patanjali gives a very beautiful metaphor. He says, Kshina vrittehe abhijatasyeva manehe. So this is later on in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras. The whole sutra is quite big, but I'm going to focus on the initial segment of the sutra. So let me chant the whole sutra. क्षीणवृत्तेरभिजातस्येव मनेर्ग्रहीतृग्रहणग्राह्येषु तत्स्तदञ्जनता समापत्तिः. And I'm going to focus on this part. Ksheenavrittehe abhijatasyeva manehe. The word mani means crystal. Crystal. Abhijatasyeva mani means blemishless, flawless crystal. When the chitta vrittis are reduced, the mind becomes crystal clear. We use this phrase to describe a very alert, very tranquil, clear state of mind, right? Mind is crystal clear. Sometimes the mind experiences the opposite. The mind is not crystal clear. It is confused. People refer to this as the brain fog. Right? There's a brain fog. We cannot think clearly. So we can think of yoga as transforming the state of the mind from a confused mind where we cannot think clearly, where the mind is filled with brain fog. We want to transform this into a crystal clear state of mind, abhijatasyeva mani. Just like, for example, when we think of the element carbon, carbon comes in various forms. In chemistry, these are called allotropes, the different allotropes of carbon. Carbon, you can see in the form of a coal. You can also see carbon in the form of a diamond. It is the same substance, but it appears in various forms. And given a choice, we would prefer to receive, or if somebody gives carbon to you, you're hoping that they give you a diamond, not coal, right? We prefer the highest, most valuable state of carbon, diamond. Like that, the mind can express itself in various modes, a confused state of mind or a crystal clear state of mind. It's the same mind, but there are two different states. So how to transform a confused state of mind to a blemishless, crystal clear state of mind? And Patanjali, in the Yoga Sutras, he talks about transforming the mind to the highest state. In fact, he talks about three inner transformations, three transformations of the mind. What are the three transformations? They are the Nirodha Parinama, Ekagrata Parinama, and Samadhi Parinama. Three Parinamas. Parinama means change or transformation. Nirodha Parinama is the transformation of a turbulent mind to a tranquil mind. Ekagrata Parinama is the transformation of the mind from a scattered mind to a one-pointed mind. For example, when the mind is scattered or shattered, the mind is in different pieces. Then consolidating that mind to one place is called Ekagrata Parinama. My teacher used to say, a mind in pieces does not have peace of mind. So when the mind is broken, shattered, it's in different pieces, there is no peace of mind there. So Ekagrata Parinama brings peace to the mind because it assembles the mind together in as one unit. It is not broken or shattered. So this transformation, Ekagrata Parinama, transforms a scattered mind to a one-pointed, highly focused state of mind. And finally, Samadhi Parinama, the transformation of the mind from a roller coaster, yo-yo mind, into an equanimous state of mind. Samatvam. In the Bhagavad Gita, we see the word samatvam. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Equanimity of the mind, equipoise of the mind is yoga. So transforming a mind that is jumping up and down into a calm, stable mind is the Samadhi Parinama. So these are the three transformation, inner transformation that happen with the practice of yoga. Now, so far we have been talking about the inner practices. So where does the familiar practice of asanas, like when we go to a yoga studio, most people are practicing asanas. They're doing something with the body. So how does this fit into the definition of yoga, namely quieting the mind in samadhi? How does it fit into these parinamas? We will see that in a few moments. Because ultimately, whatever sadhana, whatever abhyasa that we do in yoga should achieve these transformations. It should achieve an inner transformation. So, in order to achieve this transformation, Patanjali, early on in the Yoga Sutras, in the very first chapter, he says there are two key principles in yoga. In the process of yoga, to achieve the samadhi state of mind, we require two sadhanas, namely abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa vairagyabhyam tannirodha, Patanjali says. So this nirodha, citta vritti nirodha, that Patanjali talks about, quieting of the mind, can be facilitated by abhyasa, practice, and vairagya, or detachment or dispassion. In fact, here Patanjali echoes the teachings that is given in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tells Arjuna, abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. In the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, you can bring control over the unruly mind using this dual sadhanas of abhyasa and vairagya. So let's talk about what this abhyasa is. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali defines abhyasa. What is abhyasa? Tatra sthitau yatno abhyasaha. Tatra sthitau yatnaha abhyasaha. Which means abhyasa is defined as the methods that we use, the practices that we do, the attempts that we make to be established in the self. So when the monkey mind is wandering, drifting away from the self, whatever we do, whatever tricks or disciplines or techniques, methods that we use to bring the mind back to the self is called abhyasa. And these abhyasas, the very next sutra, Patanjali gives the 4 ingredients of a high quality abhyasa. What are the 4 ingredients of a high quality practice? He says, Satu dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevito dridabhumihi. The yoga practices, you can elevate the yoga practices to a high quality yoga practice with these 4 ingredients, the 4 ingredients of a high quality yoga practice. What are these 4 ingredients? The first ingredient is dirghakala, doing the practice for a long time. In other words, taking a long-term commitment to the practice of yoga. It is not just a weekend affair. It is a commitment that is for several years. The true benefits of yoga is in the long term. So that is the first ingredient of a yoga practice, long term. The second ingredient of a yoga practice is nairantarya, doing the practice consistently without a break, without taking a holiday. The third ingredient is satkara. Satkara means doing the practice with enthusiasm, with honor, respect, and sacredness to the practice. It is not just a physical practice or a mechanical practice. We are elevating the practice to that of a spiritual practice, the sacred practice that we do with enthusiasm, honor, and respect. It is a puja. And the fourth ingredient is asevitaha. Seva means to serve, service. Asevito means with a complete attitude of service. We are doing this practice of yoga to serve this vehicle called the body. In fact, we can think of the body as a temple that houses the divine self. And we are serving this body. We are serving this instrument called the mind, because the body and mind has been serving us all these years. And now in the yoga sadhana, we take the time to appreciate, to be grateful for the body and mind. So these are the 4 ingredients of a high quality yoga practice. And when we do the abhyasa with these 4 in mind, what happens is dridabhumihi. The benefits of yoga are firmly grounded. Dridabhumi, firmly grounded benefits of yoga. And in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali gives 3 broad streams of yoga sadhana. The first stream of yoga practices that he gives is for adept yogis, where he delves into the inner practices. This is called samadhi yoga or also raja yoga. This is where Patanjali talks about the introspective practices. This is meant for adept yogis who already have some level of control over their mind. They can give an instruction to their mind and the mind will listen to them. So for such people, for such yoga abhyasis, he gives the samadhi yoga. And these involve mostly inner practices, nivritti, or introspective practices. And then in the second chapter, he gives the practice of kriya yoga, yoga of action, or also called yoga of purifying action. And these are more active practices, pravritti, that means extroverted, or the focus is more on action. That's why it's called kriya yoga, yoga of action. And this is primarily intended to heal the body of pain, of kleshas, the body and the mind, to heal itself of miseries or afflictions, so that we can be put on track towards samadhi. And then he gives the third stream of practices. And this is perhaps the most famous teachings in the Yoga Sutras, the Ashtanga Yoga, the holistic practice of 8-limbed yoga. And Patanjali covers this in the second half of the second chapter and the first few sutras of the third chapter. This is a systematic set of practices, a holistic set of practices, starting with how we engage with the outer world, how we engage with the body, the breath, and finally the inner world. So this has 8 parts or 8 limbs, as the name suggests, Ashtanga Yoga. And this is a very beautiful blend of external and internal practices. Beautiful blend of pravritti and nivritti. Or to use Patanjali's terms, he talks about them as bahiranga and antaranga sadhana. And this we will do a deep dive on. In fact, all these three streams of yoga, we will explore in depth in the course that's offered in the next quarter, the yoga of the Yoga Sutras. So here is a brief a map of the Ashtanga Yoga of Maharishi Patanjali, the 8 limbs of yoga, which I'm sure are familiar to most of you in the audience. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadayo, Ashtavangani. That's how Patanjali introduces in the Yoga Sutras. These are the 8 limbs of yoga. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. The first 5 of the 8 limbs of yoga are the external practices called Bahiranga sadhanas. And you see the asana here, asana posture, and pranayama, breath regulation. These are perhaps the most visible forms of yoga in today's world. The last 3 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are inner practices called Antaranga Sadhana, internal practices. These are Dharana, which means concentration, practices of concentration to bring the mind to one pointed state. Dhyana, meditation. So here, Patanjali gives what is the definition of dhyana, because the word meditation is a very overloaded word. Different people have different ideas about what meditation is. So the exact definition of meditation is given in the Yoga Sutras, and what are some of the meditation techniques have also been given in the Yoga Sutras. And finally, samadhi is the 8th limb of Ashtanga Yoga. So we will go in depth in all of these angas, the different limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, in detail in the course Yoga of the Yoga Sutras in the upcoming quarter. So this brings us to the conclusion of this slides. Let me stop here and let me hand it over to Esther. Thank you all for your enthusiastic listening, and over to you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarvotham. Such a great insight into what the course is going to cover. And thank you for putting in all your effort into the course itself. And of course, in effort in explaining what you just did. So the Yoga of Yoga Sutras course is, I've dropped the link in the chat, and it is going to be held on Saturdays from 11 a.m. Eastern to 12:30 Eastern. Start date is April 19th, 2025, and the end date is June 28th, 2025. So I request all the attendees to have a look at the link and register for the course. We have a question, Dr. Sarvotham. It says, are these slides available to participants after the webinar?
Yeah, they are available. In fact, I believe the whole video of this webinar will be available later on YouTube. The link to the YouTube video will be made available to all the participants.
Yeah, we have launched the poll once again. It was launched at the very beginning of the webinar, and we launched it once again. I request all of you to complete the poll. It'll help us improve these webinars. And we would like to hear from you. This is how we hear from you. We have other questions that one is, aren't the 3 definitions of yoga interlinked? Complete mastery of the mind helping the jiva to unite with the Paramatma.
Indeed, that is one way to interpret the 3 definitions of yoga. So some scholars, they interpret the 3 definitions as 3 facets of the same principle. In other words, 3 sides of the same entity. You can either view the experience of yoga as a union of different aspects, or the same thing can be experienced as a balanced, equanimous state of mind. And the same thing will also allow us to unleash our full potential. So that is one way to interpret this as well. There are three definitions of the same thing, the same experience.
There's one more question that says, can practicing tapas of any one of speech, body, or mind be counted as the practice of tapas in Kriya Yoga? Or do we need a practice of all of them to gain full benefit?
Yes. So thank you, Vaibhavji, for this question. One of the three parts of Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga has three parts: tapas, svadhyaya, and Ishvara pranidhana. Tapas is usually translated as discipline, intense discipline. And in fact, the root word of tapas is tap. Tap means to heat. Heat, going through fire for the sake of purification. Fire purifies, just like we cook food before we consume the food. So going through some heat, experiencing some heat for the sake of purification and transformation is called tapas. And the exact tapas, what are the specific practices in tapas? Patanjali does not go deep into it. He just says Kriya Yoga consists of tapas and then Swadhyaya and Ishvara Pranidhana. Swadhyaya means self-inspired study, and Ishvara Pranidhana is devotion, devotion to Ishvara. So what are the specific practices of tapas? This is given in the Bhagavad Gita. For example, what you mentioned here as the tapas of the body, tapas of the speech, and tapas for the mind, namely the Sharirika tapas, and then the Vangmaya tapas and Manomaya tapas. You will find the specific practices of these three tapas in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. For example, tapas of the body, keeping the body clean, using the body to serve others, to serve elders, to serve the guru, to serve the great sages. So this is how we use the body. This is a Sharirika tapas. And then Vangmaya tapas. So tapas of the speech. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat. In other words, using the speech to not share hatred, but to speak the truth and infuse the truth with compassion. Not to speak blunt truth that will hurt others, but to communicate the truth in a very compassionate, loving manner that uplifts the other. So that is the tapas of speech. And manomaya tapas. Manaprasada saumyatvam maunam atma vinigraha is how the Bhagavad Gita manomaya tapas is defined, where the manas, we are allowing the mind to go to the place of silence. There is deep inner silence there. Maunam. And then atma vinigraha. The mind is housed in the self. The mind is centered. It is not extroverted, trying to grab happiness from various things in the outside world, but the mind is calm, content within. So this is the manomaya tapas. And yes, these tapas practices of the sharirika tapas, the bodily tapas, vangmaya tapas, tapas of speech, and the manomaya tapas, the tapas of the mind, are practices in the realm of Kriya Yoga.
So, will the course cover the 196 sutras one by one or in a different form?
What we do is, because the whole course is spread over 11 sessions, there are 11 2-hour sessions in the course. We make each session thematic. Each session, the focus will be on a particular theme. For example, the theme of Ashtanga Yoga will be the focus for 2 or 3 sessions. And then in one session, we will go deep in Kriya Yoga. That will be the theme for that session. In one of the session, the focus will be on the definition of yoga and so forth. And one of the session, the obstacles in the path of yoga. So that is how we organize the course. The systematic study of all the 196 sutras will take a much longer time. So there is a plan for a future course with the HUA to offer the second level of this course where we go over all the 196 sutras. That will take a longer time. So what we do here um, in this upcoming course, by the end of the course, we would have covered approximately, I would say 70 or 75 sutras based on the different themes for each session.
There's another question which says, will you be teaching all 8 limbs? Does this include asana and pranayama? Thank you so very much.
Yes, we will go deep in all the 8 limbs of yoga. Now, this particular course, the focus is on the understanding the foundations of yoga, the basic tenets of the yoga philosophy and the yoga wisdom. So the practical aspects, namely how to practice asanas, what are the specific pranayama practices, that is not the focus here. You see, there are other courses in the HUA and also other places where we can learn the specific asanas, Surya Namaskar, different pranayamas, and so forth. And perhaps in a future HUA course, we can integrate the two as well. There are plans for that as well. But in this particular course, the focus is going in depth on the wisdom of yoga, the principle, understanding the basic tenets of yoga philosophy. Now, if you're already practicing yoga inside the yoga mat, practice of asanas, pranayama, and so forth, this course will profoundly elevate the quality of your yoga practice experience. Because when we combine the wisdom of yoga, the principles of yoga with the yoga practice, then they work together in synergy. The knowledge of yoga and the practice of yoga, when we combine them together, it greatly uplifts the quality of our practice. And during this course, if the yoga practice is not yet a part of your daily discipline, then hopefully this course will inspire you to step into the yoga mat and begin yoga sadhana. So that is one of the objectives of this course as well.
What is the format of the course?
So the format is something similar to what we did in the webinar. We will take a particular theme or a particular topic, for example, Kriya Yoga. So one full session, we will see what are the fundamental tenets of Kriya Yoga. What are the benefits of practicing Kriya Yoga? And the principles associated with that. And the last about 20 to 30 minutes of the session will be discussions and question and answers.
Isn't pratyahara an internal practice?
That's a good question. You could club it as an internal practice, but in the Yoga Sutras, so Patanjali says once he covers the first 5 limbs up to Pratyahara, and then he talks about the last 3 limbs, the Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, he specifically refers to the last 3 limbs as Antaranga Sadhana. He says Trayam Antarangam Purvebhyaha. So Patanjali's words. So he himself categorizes the last 3 limbs as Antarangam. Trayam Antarangam Purvebhyaha. The last 3 limbs are internal compared to the first 5. So that is how he classifies and categorizes. So according to Patanjali, Pratyahara is a Bahiranga sadhana. It's an external practice. In fact, how he organizes the Ashtanga Yoga itself is very revealing. The first 5 angas of the Ashtanga Yoga, he deals with them in the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras. The last 3 limbs, he deals with them in the third chapter. So between the external and internal practices, between the Bahiranga and Antaranga sadhanas, there is a chapter break, which says something that these the first 5 and the last 3 are somehow qualitatively different practices, external versus internal practices.
There are people who practice Kriya Yoga. Does this Kriya here correspond to their practices?
Yes, the practice of Kriya Yoga that is popularized by Paramahamsa Yogananda. And in that lineage, if you read the autobiography of a yogi, when he talks about Kriya Yoga, he gives the definition of Kriya Yoga from the Yoga Sutras. So the Kriya Yoga practices in the Kriya Yoga lineage, the tradition, it is based on Patanjali's Kriya Yoga.
Yeah, is this course going to be upgraded to include practical sessions of the theory part also?
So what we are planning is to introduce another course where we have a mix of theory and practice. So this particular course in the coming quarter, the spotlight of focus will be on the theory. So there is a plan in future to integrate perhaps the first 1 hour will be some theory, and in the second hour of the session, we will jump into the yoga mat. But that is in the planning stage for a future quarter, maybe in the fall quarter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we pretty much answered all the questions. Shriramji.
I also see that there are several participants here who have joined this webinar who have done this specific course before, the Yoga of the Yoga Sutras before. So if one of you would like to share your experience with the group about the course, then I would welcome you to raise your hand or speak up.
Yeah, before that, there is one question which is saying, what is the goal of the course? I guess you already answered that. To if not anything, it'll motivate you to, go get on your yoga mat and start doing, following the Ashtanga.
That is one objective, yes. And the main objective is to go to the art of yoga, what yoga is about, based on the core yoga text, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Because yoga is much more than doing all kinds of asanas with the body. It is deeper than that. It is a holistic practice, it's a state of mind. And to bring the sacredness of the yoga practice when we uh, experience yoga. So to understand the tenets, the basic foundational tenets of yoga and the wisdom of yoga and how we can live these principles of yoga both inside and outside the yoga mat. Let me give a simple example. There are sutras of Patanjali where he talks about how to relate to people. You see, how to bring harmony when we interact with people. So we'll examine those sutras as well. That will help us elevate the quality of our experience when we deal with people. How to deal with difficult people, for example. Patanjali gives some wisdom there, and we will cover those sutras as well. That will be helpful to live the life of a yogi even outside the yoga mat.
Wow, great. We have Samujwal Majumdar and Kalyani, um, who you have invited. I mean, your previous students. So yeah, Samujwal ji, we have exactly 6 minutes. So
Okay,
3 minutes.
okay, it won't be
Uh,
6 minutes, probably a minute. I took Yoga Bhagavad Gita under Dr. Sarvotham. That was an incredible course. And one thing about that is there any other course that on Bhagavad Gita that expounds a little bit more? Because when I go through Gita, second chapter and 18th chapter and fourth chapter and stuff like that, seems like I can probably benefit much more if I get the explanations from Dr. Sarvotham. That's one thing. Another thing is that I probably will take these courses, but I have some hurdles in between. Some classes will be missed. Hopefully not, but possibly will be. And look forward to that. And it is really nice that there will be another course corresponding to this that elaborates on this philosophy in a much wider manner. And that's about it. That's about all the comments I have. The course on Bhagavad Gita was the very best course I ever took on HUA. Thank you.
So much, Samajwal. Thank you.
Thank you
Kalyani
so
ji.
much, Samajwalji.
Yeah. I did take this course with Shriram Sarvotham ji, and it was very, very, very much in depth. And Shriram Sarvotham is a wonderful teacher. I really enjoyed every session that we had, and he speaks in such a wonderful, enlightening way. It's something that really goes deep into you, and you really feel that Patanjali's Yoga Sutra has come alive. I really recommend this course to anybody who's interested, and I'm looking forward to doing the more in-depth course in the future, if that's available. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kalyani ji. Vaibhav Gupta.
Everyone. So I took this course and the Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita also with Dr. Shriram Sarvotham ji. And as
Vaibhav ji, you're not audible. Can you please speak louder?
hello, am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible, but a little clarity would be appreciated.
Okay, I can speak louder. So I took
Yes,
this
please.
Course and also the Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita with Dr. Shriram Sarvotham. And as the previous two students said, those were the two best courses I took at HUA. And Dr. Shriram's teaching style is simply fabulous. And the clarity with which he speaks and explains all the shlokas and their meanings and how to apply them practically, that is really wonderful and very enlightening. And I had been practicing the parts of Kriya Yoga like Ishwar Pranayama and Swadhyaya also before unknowingly. But this course actually provided the necessary foundation and theoretical background to understand my practices more deeply and also incorporate other practices, other missing practices which I was not doing. So I also started doing those missing practices like the question I asked about tapas today. So I also started practicing the tapas of speech after taking Dr. Shriram's course, and I noticed a profound transformation in my mindset as the Yoga Sutras promise to transform the mind. So I can say from my practical experience that these teachings, if anyone applies them sincerely and with dedication over a long period of time, they will certainly bring about a transformation of the mind. So that is my experience, and I highly recommend all who are attending this webinar to consider taking this course. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Vaibhav ji. We have many more. We have a few other questions, but we run out of time. So you can reach out to Dr. Sarvotham through his email. Is that okay, Dr. Sarvotham? Yes. So
Most
you
certainly, yes. Feel free to write to me. Yes.
okay? And your ID is email ID is
Yes, I will write in the chat box.
please yes. So please reach out to Dr. Sarvotham. He'll be happy to answer your questions. So thank you so much for joining this Friday evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarvotham. We look forward to your registrations. To all the attendees, I'm saying this to you. We look forward to your registrations and look forward to your course, Dr. Sarvotham. So
Thank you.
I would love to join the course. No tidbits of Yoga Sutras, but to learn it as a coherent subject would be very, very insightful and helpful. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Namaste,
Thank you, everyone.
everybody, and Shubharatri.